Welcome back to Workshop Friend. As you can see from my clothing, it's a lot colder here. I've not been able to use the workshop for a week or so, and in the time that I've not been in the workshop, we've had some snow, frost, and a lot of rain as a major storm came through the UK. And unfortunately, this has had an impact on my workshop, which is the subject of today's video. And this is what I'm talking about: rust. So I've had this problem before, but not as dramatically as this. Look at my shaper. And worse still, my Adcock and Shipley mill over there. So even my Colchester student lathe hasn't escaped. I gave that a good dosing of WD-40 before I went away. But yeah, condensation, humidity have been a problem. Now, of course, it tends to be the larger masses which hold on to the cold, and then when the warmer air comes through carrying the humidity, that's where the water condenses. But it's not only there. Look here on my press, there are some spacers that I use. Even they have gone rusty just in a few days. And underneath, you can see there my dividing head, that's also caught it a little bit too. So I'm going to start sorting this mess out, and as I do, think about how I can cure this problem. There are a number of reasons for this. The first is that my workshop is very damp, and I do have a dampness problem which I may or may not be able to sort out. I think the other problem is extreme changes of temperature, and I'm going to have to put some effort into insulating the workshop better to reduce the rate at which the temperature changes in here. So, you know, the problem is that the larger masses of metal, like my machinery, they get cold, the weather changes very, very quickly here, and suddenly warm, relatively warm, humid air comes in and it causes condensation. So that's something else to look at. Yeah, those two things. Try and reduce the humidity, and try also to reduce the temperature change. So I'm going to be thinking about that as I clean up, and I'll come back to you later when I actually have a plan of action. But for the time being, I'm just going to clean things up and leave the equipment with a good coating of WD-40 for this early part of the winter. I've always had this suspicion, perhaps it's a misapprehension, that a little bit of rust in the workshop looks worse than it actually is. I recently looked up the volumetric change of iron when it forms iron oxide, and I believe it's between 6 and 10 to 1. So surface rust represents a very small amount of iron that's actually been lost. With time, all of my cast iron items have formed a patina, and there's nothing that's going to change that, certainly in the conditions that I work under. I've seen some folks' workshops and they seem to have pristine steel surfaces and cast iron surfaces, but for me this is just unattainable. Well, one of the things I figured I could do to cut down on humidity and rust on my machinery was to better insulate the garage. And the most obvious candidate for that is the door. So I've been cleaning this down, ready for installing some insulation, which I've picked up, and I think this will be a cheap and effective way of addressing the biggest cause of temperature change in the workshop. So I'll start with that, and then no doubt there are other things I can do around here to improve the insulation. Now the winter's here, I can see already the temperature change here is quite dramatic, and things just cool down. The heavier items, particularly this mass here on the milling machine, it cools down the body, and it just takes a long time to warm up again. And in the meantime, the temperature here in the UK changes so rapidly, and it's humid air, and it just causes condensation. So anything I can do to cut down on this rapid temperature change will be helpful. Also, it might make the workshop a little bit more comfortable to work in. So here's a close-up of the insulation. As you can see, it's very thin. It's really just glorified bubble wrap with 2 layers of reflective material, aluminium. And its U value is supposed to be the equivalent of 150 millimeters of rock wool insulation. That's 6 inches. Now that seems quite a lot to me. I'm surprised at that. But then heat transfer is a complicated topic, and I guess its effectiveness of this is a combination of reducing conduction between the layers by virtue of the air, trapped air, and then reducing radiant transfer by virtue of the silver foil. So how that really compares with 150 millimeters of rock wool insulation on a garage door, I have no idea. Now, application's easy because it's thin and fairly lightweight, so the only tools I need are a good pair of scissors and my tape measure, and I'm using a double-sided tape to apply it to the door. That's the reason for cleaning the door well, and then for finishing off I'm using the silver foil to make the joints. So off camera I completed covering the struts, and it's made a nice neat job, I think. It feels fairly robust, and by virtue of the joints it's effectively made one large mat. And I've even gone as far as starting to insulate the frame itself, the outer frame. I debated that, but then realized it probably was worth it. I've got plenty of material and plenty of tape, so I've started the top and the side here, and that goes in quite neatly as well. Now, part of the benefit of this is not just to reduce cold in winter and condensation problems, but in the summer this door gets really hot, and actually sometimes the workshop's been a bit too hot because of the sun shining on this door. So the question I have is whether the double-sided tape is going to stand the heat on the door. We'll see. Now, the other benefit is it's slightly reduced noise transfer, and I do get a bit of noise interference coming in from outside. And another benefit is that this reflective surface throws back light into this corner of the workshop, so that's a bonus too. Anyway, I do hope that this video has been of some interest to you. Perhaps others have had rust problems like me, and you have your own ways of dealing with it. I do value your comments, and any suggestions you have as to how I can reduce rust in the workshop, that will be most welcome. Thank you for your support, and I do hope you'll join me for the next video.